Everything But Politics Podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Everything But Politics podcast. Today, we have a very cool guest, someone I've been in contact with for a while now. Happy to finally make this happen. We got Tyler Lambers on the podcast, manager of social distribution for the Pomp Podcast. Tyler, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for the invite. Happy to be here.
No, it's happy and exciting that you are here. Tyler, I guess before we kind of get into the thick of things here, why don't you give our listeners a little background on yourself, who you are, and what exactly it is that you do?
All right. Well, I guess I'll start from the beginning. Growing up, I was always into sports, loved playing sports, and I originally wanted to go into sports management. But then when I saw some people who had sports management degrees that graduated a year or two before me, and I would see them at local high school basketball games just collecting tickets, and it just looked like a grind. And that was not something that I ideally wanted to do. So then I went into the accounting route, did a tax season, 2 tax seasons at a CPA firm in Holland, Michigan. And then I joined corporate accounting, Gordon Food Service. And then when COVID hit, we were all told to work from home, obviously. And that's when I kind of went down the YouTube path and just being able to witness all the content creation that was going on. And then that that led me down the rabbit hole of finding Pomp, finding Joe Pompliano, finding John Pompliano, and then kind of just as a side hustle, working my way into a full-time job. And I don't know if you want me to get into how I got the job right now, or if you want to wait later in this podcast. But when I started work from home from COVID, I would just watch sports all the time. And then when there was no sports, I decided to look to see what's on YouTube. And then as I was working, I came across Pomp when he interviewed Dave Portnoy back in like 2020. And he was just asking Dave Portnoy all the questions that I always wanted to know, all about the Chernin deal, his Nantucket house, just stuff that I was personally interested in. So then I started following Pomp for a while. I thought his Twitter was amazing. I thought all his content was amazing. It was just authentic. And then him, Joe, and John created the Best Business Show, which they did for about a year. And then when that show launched, I started to watch it on my lunch break when I was at work. One thing about corporate accounting that I never understood was what people do during their lunch break. Like, it just was so awkward to me when you like have an hour or 2 lunch break and then you got to go back to work. And I never really knew what to do with that time. And so I just started watching this show, and I noticed that they did not have a social media presence for the show. They had their own individual accounts, but they did not have like a Twitter or an Instagram or anything like that. So I just one day I'm like, yo, dude, I should like start one as just for fun because I'm watching the show. And I saw how much money all this content creation was generating, the wave of basically TV going to YouTube. And so I started a Twitter page for him and just started tweeting out the highlights of the show, a couple quotes I liked. And at the beginning, dude, I didn't even know how to screen record on my phone. I would just take pictures of them on my laptop and tweet it out. So I just kind of figured it out as I went. And then I just worked on that for about an hour or 2 a day, either during my lunch or at night whenever I got to the show. And then Pomp DM'd me one day and he goes, do you need help with anything? Like, what's your goal with this Twitter account? How can we help you? And I just told him my name, said, all right, we'll stay in contact. And then long story short, I basically did that for 7 months for free. And then in 2021, we would talk maybe every couple months. He would give me a call, check in, but I wasn't like, yo, you looking for help? Is there any way I could join the team? It eventually progressed into that, but it was very slow. I didn't want to like push it all on him. I'd be like, yo, I want to join you. I just let it slowly play out. And then in 2021, for the Bitcoin conference, I was living in Lakeland, Florida at the time. And I wanted to come down to Miami for the Bitcoin conference. So I just randomly asked him, hey, can I come hang out with you guys at the Bitcoin conference? And he said, yeah, come on down. So I went down, met the team, and then just kept tweeting, kept pulling clips, creating videos. And then eventually he offered me a job, and I just quit Gordon Food Service and came down to Miami. And the team basically taught me editing, production, kind of the whole shebang. And now there's just two of us that run kind of the whole family office content production side of things. So kind of a crazy story. Never thought I'd be here, but it kind of worked out.
Totally. And there's a lot to uncover right there, obviously. So I want to go back to something you said regarding like 2020 and COVID. When you said you got into the YouTube stuff, what exactly do you mean when you got into the YouTube stuff? Were you just like reposting other people's videos? Was it all Pomp related? Like what exactly were you doing on YouTube?
By YouTube stuff, I just meant that I was consuming the YouTube content.
Gotcha.
Beforehand, I was watching just sports, watching Netflix, watching Amazon Prime. I wasn't big into YouTube. And then once COVID hit, I was like, whoa, this is like a whole basically treasure chest that I've never opened, that of just all this amazing content, people live streaming when the market would open, people live streaming when Jerome Powell was talking, all these podcasts that I just never kind of saw before, if that makes sense.
It does. And also you mentioned that you wanted to go the sports management route, but you didn't like what you saw with your friends and the people that were involved with it. In hindsight, do you think the accounting route was the way, or would you consider yourself at the time like a miserable 9 to 5, bro?
I definitely think accounting was the best degree I could have got, and I have no regrets getting that. I learned a lot. I can look at an income statement, balance sheet, understand what's going on, expenses, all that. I would not say I was a miserable 9 to 5. I actually enjoyed the accounting, but the one thing that I could never answer, I was working my way up. I had 3 different jobs in, I think, 5 years at the company I was at. So I definitely liked it. But the one thing that I could never answer was when I was getting interviewed, they said, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I always wanted to say, not doing this, but I didn't want to, because I heard somebody say, if you do not want your boss's job, then try to find something else. And I didn't really want to stay there and become like a controller or director. I enjoyed it. The company was great. I still stay in touch with a handful of people there, and I learned a lot. But I just don't like the idea of closing your laptop at like 5 or 6 at night and then just not doing anything the rest of the night. I just didn't really know what to do at night most of the times. So I wouldn't say I was miserable. I enjoyed it, but it was not something I saw myself doing my whole career.
Yeah, that makes sense. And like, Tyler, everything you learned at the accounting firm, do you use any of it now in your work?
Ooh, not really. I mean, if Pomp will have on a guest and they're talking numbers, I guess I can relate to it a little bit. Or if I put together like an analytics spreadsheet of how our social channel and YouTube channel and podcast numbers are doing, I kind of use some of my Google Sheet and Excel knowledge to create charts, but that's really about it. I don't really do anything journal entry, operating expenses related. So it's kind of like a complete 360 way. But
sorry,
one thing that I also like about accounting is if this does like fall through, or if I do get sick of the internet content, I can always go back to the accounting. So that's something that I kind of like to have in my back pocket.
True.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as like manager of social distribution, that's obviously such a like I feel like that unpacks a lot there. What do you like do from Monday to Friday? I feel like every day is different regarding obviously you said editing, research, guest work. Can you kind of give us a breakdown of what it is exactly you do?
Yeah, that title, it doesn't, I don't even know like what that means or
Yeah.
how I got that title. It was just when Pomp sent me the offer letter, it was on there. I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds cool. But so basically we have a team of two. It's a guy named Jordy and we handle all the content for the whole office basically. And we typically have 3 to 4 interviews, maybe 5 interviews a week. And we come in, we get the studio set up for if it's in person, Zoom. We get the lighting, make sure all the cards are cleared. We basically produce the whole thing, and then we record the interview. And then some days we put out the interview the same day. Sometimes we wait till the next day. But I look at it in 3 ways. There's the content production of it, and then there's the editing of it, and then there's just basically the distribution of it. And Jordy and I he's been doing it for almost a decade, so he's a lot better than I am at the editing part of it. So we'll both kind of tackle the interview, whoever wants to do it, the production. It's not rocket science. But then he usually edits the interview. He'll send me the interview, and then I'll just create a bunch of social clips for it, put it on Apple Podcasts, put it on Spotify podcasts, and then boom, we'll release the interview. And then there's also a handful of businesses that work out of the office. So anytime anyone in the business wants to do content, they basically request time. They'll come in the studio, we'll set up the teleprompter, we'll produce their content, we'll edit it for them, and then we'll send it to them and they'll do whatever it is they want to do with the content. But it's a lot of just producing the content, editing it, and then if I ever have downtime, I'll just find random clips of Pomp and create a couple shorts for him. Yeah, basically it from a Monday to Friday. And then, I mean, Paulina had her audiobook, so she was busy working on her audiobook and her new book, Hidden Genius. Yep. So there's always just a mishmash of content that's getting produced.
Yeah, Tyler, you mentioned like you guys will work on distribution. Aside from like posting it like to the big platforms, how else do you guys distribute this podcast?
Twitter, I will create 4 or 5 clips for Twitter. We started a YouTube clips channel, so we'll put out either 8-minute clips on that, or I'll create a couple of reels for that, or a couple of shorts for that. We used to have a TikTok, but that got banned. They don't like when you talk about Bitcoin on TikTok, I guess. And then we'll send some reels to Pomp for his Instagram, but basically Twitter, YouTube, and then he also references it in his Pomp letter that he writes every morning, an email to all the investors that are subscribed to his letter. So that's the game plan, is just to throw it out there and get as many eyeballs on it as you can.
Well, yeah, and the crazy thing about Anthony is that he just recently released his 1200th 16th episode, which is just like mind-boggling. This is our 40 something for us, and we feel we've made really good progress. To have that many episodes is just crazy. When did so you mentioned you got involved like 2021. You know exactly what episode it was that you first contributed?
Oh, that's a good question. But yeah, I mean, Pomp, sometimes he'll do 4 interviews in a day. I don't know how the guy's the hardest work I've ever seen. But the first time I went in the studio, Jeff Booth was in there during the Bitcoin conference. So what must have been May of 2021 was the actual the first in-person interview that I witnessed. And then the first one that I produced was Bill Pulte or Gideon Powell. This past December was when I basically started producing the podcast by myself, because a lot of people went home for Christmas and I was the only one here. So I kind of got thrown into the fire, like, oh, here, can you produce this? So the first one I produced was this past December, but the first one I saw in person was last May.
Okay.
And was
Yeah.
that, you think, and since then he's done, over 200 or 300 episodes?
Yeah, we normally release, I don't know what number that Jeff Booth one was, but yeah, we release 3 a week, 4 a week. So what is that? 3 times? Maybe can't do math right now. 4 a week, 16. Yeah, I don't know.
So
A lot.
200 a year, maybe. I don't know. 150 a year.
I'm looking now that there were 2 with Jeff Booth. One was the 572nd episode, and then the other one was 904 on how inflation is theft.
Yeah, okay. So that 904 one was the first one I saw in person, yeah.
Okay. So
And are all of these in person? Like, are there any guests that he'll travel for, maybe do remote, like virtually, like we are right now? How does that work?
Ideally, we would like to get them in person. He does do a lot of Zoom interviews. I personally like the in-person one because I get to meet the guest, and it performs a lot better on all the social platforms. But no, whoever he wants, I think he basically reaches out, and then if they can't do it in person, he'll just do it via Zoom. And then if he'll travel every now and then to go speak at a conference. He flew to New York and did Andrew Schultz podcast
Nice.
a little bit ago. So yeah, he will travel and go on podcasts.
And Tyler, of all these podcasts he's doing, does he have to pay any of these people to come on his podcast?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm not involved in any of that.
Yeah.
Like sponsorships, that's just not me. No, I don't. I've never heard of him paying someone to come on the podcast.
That's good.
And
So no.
similar to how we got you in the podcast, I just sent you a DM. We started emailing and arranged this date and time. How does he go about that? Is he just sending out DMs too, or is there like a team of people that contacts another team of people?
No, it's basically him. If he comes, one thing he's very good at is identifying people early on. So we'll have a number of people on the podcast, and then they'll go and do bigger podcasts a couple months. But no, I think he just reaches out and DMs them on Twitter, or he'll send him an email. Every now and then he'll tweet something like, who is one of the best up and coming investors, or who is a great early startup founder, and then he'll look at the replies, and then DM them. And then if there's anything timely, he'll have those people on. So when BlackRock filed for a Bitcoin trust, that night we had on 2 of Bloomberg's ETF experts, and then we released it the next day. So some of it is timely, and we just try to get the best people we can for that specific situation. A lot of it is just who he wants to talk to. He'll reach out and we'll get him on.
And what was your knowledge on business, economics, Bitcoin? Are you just much smarter now than you were when you first started? Because there's so much goes into this.
I mean, I wouldn't consider myself a very smart guy, but I do get to listen to some of the smartest people, I would say, on the internet on a daily basis. A lot of it, I mean, I'll be honest, some of it goes way over my head. But I try to retain a lot of it. And yeah, I mean, when it comes to Bitcoin, I listen to a lot of stuff about Bitcoin. That's one thing that I am pretty sold on. And when it comes to business, I personally have never started a company. So I don't have any hands-on experience, but yeah, I feel like if I would, I know how to raise capital. I know how to run a team. I would know the day-to-day basics, but shit's probably really hard, to be honest.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So then, Tyler, going more into social media, we kind of more recently just started a Twitter page and Facebook, but we found the Twitter page to be the hardest to grow on. And I'm wondering what kind of tricks and ideas you guys find most successful for growing on Twitter.
Timely information is really key, and also replying to big accounts helps. I got lucky because Pomp has like 1.6 million followers on Twitter. So I kind of got a little kick from him. But I would say DMing people, and then to grow on Twitter, I feel like you really, at the beginning, you need a niche. Like you need a specific niche, and then you go deep into that niche and just start replying to people, creating content based on that niche. And then hopefully it continues to grow. And then once you kind of expand that niche, you can go into other niches. But yeah, one thing that I feel like I could do a lot more of on our podcast account is replying to people. So I think that is just a great way to do it. And then just continually posting. I mean, every single day, I'm on the internet all day, basically every day, I feel like. And I'm always posting on Twitter, always on YouTube, always creating stuff, even on the weekends. So it's just, you just got to post a lot, and eventually it'll grow.
Well, we've come to learn too, the Twitter algorithm is much different than the Meta algorithm. Like we feel like you guys do, you get rewarded for those long threads. Like that there's maybe like 6 to 10 tweets of just information regarding a certain subject. Our content right now is much more like media related and not thread based. So that's kind of where I feel like our we haven't really hit the algorithm in regards to Twitter. Like Evan said, we've blown up on Facebook in a short amount of time, and Instagram has grown as well. But really, Twitter's just at a standstill. So that's why we're curious to hear what you guys do to help grow your page.
Yeah, Twitter is tough. I mean, right now I think that they're rewarding long format videos. So if you publish entire episodes on Twitter, I think that is what Elon and the team wants, because right now on Twitter, they're realizing that if you post a YouTube link and then you just hit the YouTube link and it takes you to YouTube, Twitter doesn't get any benefit from that.
True.
They want you to stay on the app, and they actually created a picture in picture, so you can now watch a video on Twitter and continue to scroll on Twitter. So I think that they're pushing videos pretty heavy right now. And I think I saw Elon tweet one time that the longer someone stays on your video, the more they're going to push it. So at least in my feed, I just see a bunch of just wild, crazy clips that I've never seen before. But I think that's what they're pushing right now. And the threads, I'm not a huge threads guy. I think a lot of them are pretty cringe. But I mean, they work, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think Joe Pomp puts out some amazing threads.
Oh yeah, dude. Joe's Twitter,
he's blowing up.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah, he's awesome. And yeah, his content's amazing. But his threads, yeah, I think he was one of the first ones to actually start the thread game on Twitter. This was back in 2020, and he would write a newsletter every morning, and then he basically would take that into a tweet thread. And I'm pretty sure he was one of the first ones to start that thread. So shout out to Joe for that.
No doubt. Yeah, Weird is director of research on the podcast, Eric Kirbian. And Eric was really just explaining the amount of work that goes into it for those threads, the podcast, and the Huddle Up newsletter. And what he does is, what him and Joe do is really crazy. The behind the scenes stuff that you don't hear about is, like you're kind of explaining to us now, is really underappreciated.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Joe is very much like attention to detail. When he comes in studio, he has his whole script outlined. He basically wants every line to be perfect. And I give him credit for that. He very much knows exactly what he wants. When some content creators just want to put out as much as possible, Joe is very much like, no, this needs to be good content.
Yeah.
So it's working for him. And yeah, I mean, I think he's gonna be massive. I mean, he already is massive, but his stuff's great.
So, and does Joe also do his podcast in your guys' studio there?
He usually travels to the guests.
Mm-hmm.
He used to record shorts out of our studio, and then he would also record the long form documentaries. But now he transitioned into doing his podcast. I'm pretty sure he just does it from his apartment.
Okay.
But every now and then he'll come back into the studio and we'll quick record something, but it's not as often as it used to be.
Wait, something so I mean, aside from the social media exposure and just continually posting quality, what not distribution from a distribution standpoint, but from a marketing standpoint, what are some like really effective ways that you've noticed, maybe that don't involve social media? What do you think works for you guys that isn't distribution based or social media based?
Um, I think a lot of it is just consistency, man.
Yeah.
We have a great following that just every day listens to our podcast on Apple Podcast and Spotify. And if you can just continually release episodes every day or every other day, and people know that, like, oh, when I get off of work, I got this podcast. Oh, on the way to work on the train. Oh, at the gym. I think consistency is a lot of it, and just yeah, I mean that's what a lot of it is, and basically asking the guests what you would want to know. And I think there's a balance between doing too much prep and not enough prep, just kind of that sweet spot where you just want a casual information or casual conversation. But yeah, I think just consistency is a big thing of it.
Well, yeah, like anything in life, like the more consistent you are, the better chance you have of being successful.
Yeah. I mean, all the big podcasts I follow, they've been doing it forever. The ones that I listen to are McAfee. I mean, he's been doing it for years.
Yep.
Rogan, obviously, years. Theo Vaughn, I listen to. And then Joe and Anthony. Those are like the brunt of it.
I'm with you there. I listen to all those guys.
It takes years and years and years. And I mean, I think podcasting is going to just continue to grow. So I think it's a great place to be if you're even starting a podcast, because 20 years down the line, it just starts to compound and the results and the growth will come at some point.
Well, and similar to like music, like, this podcast will be here long before when we're gone, they don't go anywhere.
Yeah. One thing that kind of struck me when I went down this content rabbit hole was you basically can take a 2-hour interview and you take that 2-hour interview, you get maybe 8 or 9 clips that you can put on Twitter, you can put on YouTube, you can put on Instagram, YouTube, and then you can basically monetize that 2-hour interview into like a dozen clips, and you can monetize that for like 2 decades. Every now and then we'll have a video that we put up on YouTube, an interview on YouTube that we published in 2020, and it will just randomly take off. And it's like we don't have to do any work. It just sits there. So I think just getting content out there, and eventually one of them will hit, and then it will just grow.
Well, that's the thing about YouTube too. YouTube definitely has the longest shelf life, because if you post some of these things on Instagram or Twitter, they just fall to the bottom of your feed.
Yeah,
But YouTube's so direct in what you're looking for that it will resurface. Like, I watch videos, whatever it may be, from 3, 4, or even 5 years ago that are still relevant today, just because it's a direct search bar.
Right. Yep.
Yeah,
I agree.
And Tyler, let's shift gears here for a second. I want to talk about Lyceum Miami. I told you I was there. I thought it was really cool. It was kind of one of my first events that was like that. What did the prep look like for you going into that?
Jordy and I had to create just a bunch of promotional videos. He took the brunt of it, but to be honest, we really didn't have to do that much. We hired a third party to do all the production of it. We also had to create a couple graphics for each speaker. But there's someone on our team who handles all of the sponsorships and basically the marketing aspect of it. And she handled, in my opinion, 90% of everything that we had to do. And then when Jordy and I were there, we were basically taking pictures, creating videos, tweeting out as the event was going on. But besides that, there wasn't a whole lot. We didn't have to choose any of the guests. I think Pomp reached out and got all the guests. So I personally didn't have to do the whole lot, to be honest.
It was an impressive roster. I definitely learned a lot that day, and it was really like intimate. You got to talk to all these people when they were done. Like I met Pomp. I got to speak with Chris Williamson for a little bit. It was really just a cool, like, up close and personal kind of thing. And I feel like most of those events aren't really giving off the same vibe. They're more like security, like enclosed like that. So it was really a cool event he put together.
Yeah, it was awesome. In the morning when I got there, I was chilling with a couple guys from the office, and all of a sudden we see Kathy Wood just walking by, like by herself. I was like, yo, Kathy Wood is just walking right in front of us with like no security, no team, no nothing. So that's, yeah, correct. That's kind of how it was. It was just very authentic, and I enjoyed it as well. And the plan is to continue to put on those live events in the future. So I really like those as well.
Yeah, it was a great experience. Like I said, and like you met people that are like-minded, other people creating podcasts, obviously a lot of Bitcoin people. So yeah, really, if he does another one, I'd definitely be there.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's great to hear.
Yeah, it was great.
Tyler, talking about a little bit about Joe's podcast, on average, how many listeners do you guys get per episode?
You talking Joe or Anthony's?
Anthony, excuse me.
Audio wise, we get between 25 and 30,000. That's just Spotify and Anchor. And then on YouTube, you can see, I guess, how many we get. YouTube, like you said, it has potential to do really well, or potential to, I guess, tank. But we've had interviews that got 100,000, some that had 200,000. We had one that hit 1 million. So it all kind of depends. We've had a couple that hit like 2,000. So on average, I would say. But then he's also been putting the long form ones on Twitter as well. So that's another, I don't know, 50 to 100,000.
And are those also being put out in video form?
Yeah, those are, yeah. So you can now put out 2-hour episodes on Twitter. So beforehand, we would not put them out on Twitter. It would just be YouTube and Anchor. But now we could put it on Twitter. So I don't, what's that, man? Between like, I don't know, 70,000 to potentially millions, I guess. I don't know.
You got a wide range.
Yeah,
but it's cool. I mean, and how obviously the guests are so important, but if he's doing averaging 25 to 30, it just shows that he's gained that fan base alone. Like he doesn't really need a guest, although they make the episodes a little much better, I guess, for everyone, right?
right. Yeah. I mean, what we've learned is that a lot of it comes down to just guest and the topic. Those two are, I think, are the main drivers of the performance of the podcast. And then if you can time up the guest with a specific timely situation, that's when it just takes off. Like we had Balaji on days after he made a bet that Bitcoin would go to $1 million in 90 days. And we quickly had him on the podcast that night, released it the next day. And that one got I don't know, 250,000 on YouTube. So
Wow.
guest, topic, and just the timely situations are the three criteria that drive most of the performance.
And who's been your favorite guest that you've gotten the opportunity to meet?
Oh, my favorite, there's two of them, I would say. John Shahidi, he's the
That's
president of Nelk Boys and Happy Dad and that whole empire. He
Yep.
was in the studio on a Friday afternoon, which was cool. Got to meet him, talk to him for a bit, and then I also met Mike Stud. He goes by just Mike now. But I was listening to him since college, and he was also in studio about a month ago. And I mean, I got to talk to him for 10 minutes or so as well. And then two of them that were just awesome as well, but not my top two, were Jake Paul and Liver King we had in studio.
Nice.
Those two were just like dudes you see and you're like, whoa, like they're just, I guess, like an internet celebrity at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, John Shahidi and Mike would probably be my top two.
That was my favorite episode you guys did. It was with John.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of the Nelk
yeah,
Empire as well.
he's awesome, man. They're what they're doing is very impressive.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this kind of before we wrap up. Now that you're in Miami, obviously fast lifestyle, a lot going on every second of every day. If there was a 20 something that was not curious, was interested in moving down there, but maybe wasn't in the best financial situation, what would your advice be to that 20 something?
Miami can be as fast as you want it to be honest. I tell a lot of people I drank a lot more before I moved to Miami, which people are surprised by that. Um, it's all about who you surround yourself with. I mean, there's people in the office here that don't drink. So that it's kind of contagious, and I don't drink as much. There's just so much to do in Miami, where in Michigan, where I grew up, in the winter, it was cold, snowy. I didn't want to drive anywhere. So I'm like, I'll just drink. Like, yeah, why not? But as far as advice for a 20-something-year-old when they want to move to Miami, I would, gosh, I don't know. It depends on what career you want to pursue, I guess.
Yeah.
Miami's definitely not cheap, but it can be as cheap as you make it. And I would just reach out, DM as many people as possible who live in Miami, try to get as many as connections as you can. Come down for a week in the summer, because a lot of people think Miami's great and it's awesome, but during the summertime, as we were talking beforehand, it rains a lot, it's humid.
Yeah.
But I would just continue growing your finances where you currently are, and then if you ever want to take a leap, just, I guess, send it and, and see where you end up. You can always move back to where you originally were.
No,
Yeah.
100%. And I'm 23 currently, and I've already had college friends that have lived there and have already left. And I have college friends that move back home and want to move to Miami. So it's such a happening spot right now, and there's just, like I said, so much going on. And it's like alluring if you're coming from somewhere that's cold, somewhere that maybe doesn't have much going on, similar to like Michigan or Indiana here. So it's definitely I see the temptation, but like I said, Boca Raton's got a nice pace. It's slower, it's less expensive, it's just more calm.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I live right across the street from the studio or from the office, so I hardly drive, which helps out a lot.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I know people who drive into the office and they probably hate the commute they have. But no, Miami is great. I mean, they have the Miami Heat Arena that you can go walk to. There's podcasts, Fresh and Fit podcast.
Yeah, they're
I
good
don't know if you
too.
guys know them. Their studio's in the apartment next door. So I just always will stumble upon and see people just walking throughout Brickell, and it's pretty cool.
It is cool. And I have friends that ask me, and I'm like, I don't live in Miami, I live in Boca, but I would advise Fort Lauderdale, honestly. I think that's like the perfect mix. And you're right in the middle. You're only 30 minutes from like Palm Beach, 30 minutes from Miami. So that's
Yeah, I listen to PBD podcast, Patrick Bet David, and he's in Fort Lauderdale, and he says the same thing. Like Fort Lauderdale is definitely a great option as well. I've been up there a couple times, but not as often as I want to.
It's nice. And I'm also a big fan of PBD podcast. They do a great job. And I still got to listen to that Andrew Tate interview they just did.
Oh yeah. I think I've listened to like an hour and a half of it. But like there's just so much content. I can't keep up with all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's like a full-time job to listen to everything.
Totally.
Oh.
Last one more question for you, Tyler, before we let you go. Here we are in 2023. Someone is listening to this, wants to create a podcast, get going on creating content. What is your one word of advice?
Just choose a niche. It's just got to be a specific niche at the beginning. It could be like sports betting, or a specific sports team, or a specific area of business. If you just want to be like just 25 and younger startup founders, you want to interview them. You want to interview retired CEOs. It just has to be like a specific niche. I see a lot of people who create podcasts and they just want to talk just like sports. And it's like, nobody's going to listen unless you first give them a reason to listen and then grow that niche. And then eventually you'll start to grow, and then you can kind of expand what you want to talk about. But at the beginning, personally, I would just choose exactly who you want to talk to, reach out to as many guests that fit that criteria, and then go from there. And then, like I said beforehand, just be as consistent as possible. A lot of people want to start a podcast. A lot of people think, oh, it looks easy, but it's not always easy. It takes a lot of work, and you got to put out content every single day. So that's what I would advise.
Yeah, Evan and I kind of learned that the hard way. We were just the first few episodes were just us kind of talking about a whole lot of everything. TV shows, sports betting was a big one. And then we kind of realized like this show is more enjoyable for not only us, but also for our guests, or if we have guests on.
And
So
our
that's what we're
listeners,
doing
when we have guests.
Yeah, so we've had guests on since like January every week. So it's been great getting to meet new people and learn about them too.
Yeah, I mean, I give you guys kudos. I've had a handful of people who like, let's start a podcast, but 99% of them don't. It's like, then do it. Like, you don't want to build a reputation on what you want to do or what you're gonna do. Just like do it. And then content's always evolving. So that's another, I guess, suggestion I would have is just try to keep up, look at what other people in your area are doing, and just go from there and just blast out as many distribution channels as you can.
Totally.
All right. Well, thank you so much again, Tyler. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was awesome.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. All right, guys. See everyone next week, and thanks for listening.
Peace.